By the winter of 1644, Parliament has been fighting its war for 2 years and has arrived at a conclusion that nobody finds comfortable, but everybody finds unavoidable. The army is not working. This requires some qualification. Individual engagements have been won. Marston Moor in July 1644 is a genuine and significant victory. The North lost to the King, Newcastle fallen, the Royalist position above the Trent effectively destroyed. But Marston Moor is won largely by Cromwell's cavalry and the Scottish infantry of the Covenanting army, which is to say, it is won by the parts of the parliamentary coalition that operate outside the standard assumptions of how English armies are raised and commanded. The parts that operate inside those assumptions, Essex's Army of the South, Manchester's Army of the Eastern Association, the various county forces that answer to county committees with their own agendas and their own reluctance to send their men beyond their own borders, these parts have not covered themselves in distinction. Essex has lost his entire infantry at Lostwithiel in September 1644, trapped by the King in Cornwall and forced to surrender on terms that allow his cavalry to escape, while his foot march out without weapons into a Royalist-held countryside. He rides out himself ahead of them, which is the kind of detail that gets into the dispatches and does not come out. The infantry struggle back to London in ones and twos over the following weeks, bootless, weaponless, many of them sick, the wreckage of an army that walked into a trap a competent general should have avoided. Manchester fights indecisively at the Second Battle of Newbury in October 1644, has Charles's army within his grasp on 2 separate occasions, and declines to press either advantage with the thoroughness the situation requires. When Cromwell, furious and barely containing it, presses him afterward on why the pursuit was not ordered, Manchester's answer is the answer of a man who has thought the thing through and arrived at the wrong conclusion. If we beat the King 99 times, he is king still. But if he beats us once, we shall be hanged. Cromwell stares at him. The logic is, in its way, impeccable. Manchester is a peer of the realm. He has joined a rebellion against his king in the genuine belief that constitutional pressure will produce constitutional reform, and he has no more interest in destroying the monarchy than he has in destroying himself, which is, as he correctly observes, what losing a battle against the king would accomplish. He is fighting a limited war for limited ends, and he is fighting it with the careful, self-preserving instincts of a man who has a great deal to lose. The problem, which Cromwell sees with absolute clarity from his position as a man with rather less hereditary stake in the existing order, is that limited wars fought with limited commitment tend to produce limited results. And limited results in this particular war mean the thing goes on indefinitely. Season after season of inconclusive marching and cautious engagement, the country bled of men and money and agricultural productivity, Parliament's coalition slowly corroding under the weight of its own internal contradictions until somebody eventually makes a mistake large enough to end it, and there is no guarantee that somebody will be on the right side. Cromwell reports Manchester to Parliament. Manchester reports Cromwell. The committee rooms of Westminster fill with the particular atmosphere of an institution conducting an argument it cannot quite bring itself to resolve, because resolving it requires admitting something about the nature of the war that most of its members have not yet decided they are willing to admit. Chapter 2. The self-denying ordinance and what it actually means. The solution, when it comes, is characteristically indirect. Cromwell proposes it in December 1644 with the political deftness of a man who has been thinking about the problem for considerably longer than the parliamentary debate suggests. The self-denying ordinance requiring all members of Parliament to resign their military commands. This is presented as a reform measure, a way of separating military and political authority, of ensuring that the army is commanded by men who are there to fight, rather than men who are there to protect their political position. It is all of these things. It is also, and primarily, a mechanism for removing Essex and Manchester from command without the political catastrophe that direct dismissal would produce. The genius of the instrument is its apparent impartiality. It applies to everyone, including Cromwell himself, who resigns his command with every appearance of sincere compliance, knowing that Parliament will find a way to exempt him when the time comes because Parliament needs him in the field and there is nobody obvious to replace him. He is right about this. He is granted repeated extensions, temporary commissions, special exemptions, until the war ends, and the question of the ordinance's application to his case is quietly shelved. Essex receives the ordinance with the dignity of a man who sees exactly what is being done to him and chooses not to say so in a way that could be quoted later. He resigns. He dies the following year, September 1646, of what the physicians call a chill, and what more careful observers might diagnose as the accumulated weight of having spent 3 years fighting a war. He was not quite capable of winning for a cause. He was not quite capable of believing in wholeheartedly, commanded by men who had more to lose than he did, and less willingness to risk it. Manchester survives into the Restoration, accommodating himself to successive political arrangements with the flexibility of a man who has always prioritized survival over consistency. He is, in this respect, considerably more successful than most of the people in this story. The self-denying ordinance clears the ground. What is planted in the cleared ground is the new model army. Chapter 3. Building something different. The ordinance establishing the new model army passes in February 1645. Sir Thomas Fairfax is appointed commander, 33 years old, a Yorkshireman of distinguished military record and remarkable political neutrality, a man who has fought with consistent effectiveness throughout the war, without generating the factional controversies that have attached themselves to almost every other senior parliamentary commander. He is not a visionary. He is not a theologian. He is a professional soldier of exceptional competence who can be trusted to command without pursuing a personal agenda. And this, in the winter of 1644, is a quality so rare and so needed that Parliament elevates it above everything else. Cromwell is appointed Lieutenant General of Horse under Fairfax, technically subordinate, practically indispensable, the relationship between the two men functioning with an efficiency that suggests genuine mutual respect rather than merely formal hierarchy. Fairfax fights the battles. Cromwell fights the battles and thinks about what they mean. The division of labour suits both men. The new model army is set at an establishment of 22,000 men, 12 regiments of foot, 11 regiments of horse, 1 regiment of dragoons. This is, on paper, not vastly different from previous parliamentary armies. The difference is in the details of how it is raised, paid, trained, and commanded, and the details, as usual, are where the actual history lives. Pay is the foundation. Previous parliamentary armies have suffered chronically from the same disease that afflicted the king's forces at Berwick in 1639. Soldiers owed months of back wages who desert, mutiny, or simply stop fighting with any great enthusiasm when the financial relationship between employer and employee breaks down. The new model army is funded by a monthly assessment, a systematic national tax, collected with the efficiency of a state that has, somewhat to its own surprise, developed administrative competence under the pressure of war, that produces reliable revenue and therefore reliable pay. Men who are paid fight differently from men who are not. This is not a complicated observation, but it is one that the military administration of the 1640s has been making with some difficulty for 3 years before the new model army puts it into institutional practice. Promotion is the second innovation, and the more socially radical one. Fairfax appoints officers on the basis of demonstrated military competence rather than social position, not exclusively, not entirely, not without the inevitable compromises that any institution makes with the society it exists within, but as a declared and operative principle in a way that no previous English army has managed. Colonels who cannot command are replaced. Captains who can are promoted. The result, over the course of 1645, is a command structure in which the correlation between rank and effectiveness is higher than in any army England has previously fielded. The Royalists notice this. Prince Rupert notices it with particular sharpness, having spent 3 years fighting parliamentary armies whose commanders' social anxiety about aggressive action was legible in every engagement. The new model army's officers, he observes, with the professional respect of a man who has been on the wrong end of their competence, fight as though they have nothing to lose and everything to prove, which, for the most part, they do. The soldiers themselves are a more complicated question. The new model army is not, contrary to its mythology, an army of Puritan saints motivated entirely by theological conviction and the expectation of God's favour. It is an army, which means it contains the full human range, the genuinely devout alongside the professionally indifferent, the politically engaged alongside the ones who joined because the pay is more reliable than agricultural labour, and the food, such as it is, more consistent. What the army does contain in proportions higher than any previous English force is a significant number of men who know what they are fighting for, who have read the pamphlets, attended the prayer meetings, argued about the constitutional questions in the way that the printing press and the breakdown of censorship have made possible for the first time in English history. These men are not necessarily better soldiers individually. Collectively, in the aggregate effect of their presence on the army's culture and cohesion, they produce a force with a resilience under pressure that previous parliamentary armies have conspicuously lacked. Cromwell understands this. He has been building toward it since Grantham in 1643, selecting his own troopers on precisely these criteria. And the new model army is in many respects the scaling up of what he has already proven works in the Eastern Association. Chapter 4. Naseby, June 1645. The new model army has been in existence for 4 months when it meets the King's main field army at Naseby in Northamptonshire on 14th June 1645. The battle is the new model's examination, and the new model passes it with a comprehensiveness that leaves no room for qualification. The morning begins badly. Rupert's cavalry charges on the Royalist right with the brilliance that has characterized every Royalist cavalry action of the war, breaks the parliamentary horse opposite him, and rides on, past the moment of tactical advantage, through the parliamentary baggage train, toward the parliamentary artillery park, away from the field and away from the battle in the way that royalist cavalry has always ridden when given the opportunity. He is gone, by most accounts, for the better part of an hour. In that hour, Cromwell's cavalry on the opposite flank does something different. It breaks the royalist horse facing it, yes, thoroughly, professionally, without apparent difficulty. And then it stops. The troopers pull up. The officers dress the lines, the horses are turned, and the cavalry moves, at the trot, back toward the centre of the battle where the royalist infantry are pressing hard against Fairfax's foot, and the issue is, for a few minutes, genuinely uncertain. The royalist infantry are good. They are among the best foot the king has, hardened veterans of 3 years campaigning, fighting with the particular intensity of men who understand that this battle matters in a way that previous battles have not quite mattered. They push the new model foot back. They take the parliamentary colours. They come within reaching distance of a breakthrough that would unravel the entire parliamentary line. Cromwell's cavalry hits them in the flank. The royalist infantry, pressed from the front by recovering parliamentary foot, and struck from the flank by cavalry they cannot see coming until it arrives, disintegrate. Not breaks, disintegrate. The cohesion dissolves in minutes. Men throw down weapons and run, or stand and die, or surrender in groups with the mechanical suddenness of a structure that has passed its load-bearing limit. 5,000 prisoners, the Royal Artillery captured entire. The King's personal correspondence, every letter, every negotiation, every secret overture to Irish Confederates and French Cardinals and Scottish Presbyterians, taken in his coach and published by Parliament within weeks as proof of everything they have been saying about his good faith for 5 years. Charles watches from a rise to the north. He attempts to lead a cavalry charge personally, to throw himself into the collapsing fight in the way that kings occasionally do when the alternative is watching their cause end. His companions physically restrain his horse, turn it, ride him from the field. He is never in the field again, in any meaningful sense. Rupert returns from his pursuit to find the battle over and lost. He rides through the wreckage with the expression of a man encountering a proof he cannot refute. The demonstration in blood and abandoned artillery and 5,000 prisoners walking north in the June sunshine, that the cavalry charge which has defined his entire military career is not, in fact, sufficient. That an army which cannot recall itself, which cannot turn from the pursuit and return to the decisive point, which substitutes brilliance for discipline and tactical flair for strategic patience, this army loses to an army that can and does. The new model army has been built on precisely this lesson, drawn from precisely the battles Rupert has fought and won and lost with the same technique. It has been built to beat Rupert, and at Naseby it beats him so thoroughly that the question of the war's outcome ceases to be a question. What the army actually was, the new model. Army is remembered in the popular history of the period primarily for two things: winning the Civil War and eventually cutting off the king's head. Both are accurate. Neither quite captures what the institution was or what it meant. It is the first English army built on the explicit principle that effectiveness matters more than birth, that a russet-coated captain who knows what he fights for is worth more than a gentleman who fights from habit and social obligation. This principle is not, in 1645, as radical as it sounds in 2025, because the new model army is not a democratic institution and is not intended to be. It is a professional one. The distinction is important. What Fairfax and Cromwell are doing is not giving power to the people, they are giving command to the competent, which is a different thing entirely, though the two get conflated in the subsequent mythology. What the army does, over the course of its existence, is produce a generation of men, officers, and soldiers, both, who have learned to think about authority differently. Not to accept it, because it comes from above, not to grant it, because it comes with the right accent and the right acreage, but to extend it provisionally, on the basis of demonstrated quality, and to question it when it fails the demonstration. This habit of mind, acquired in the field, in the prayer meetings, in the extraordinary internal debates the army conducts about its own political purpose throughout the late 1640s, does not disappear when the army is eventually disbanded at the Restoration. It goes somewhere. It becomes part of the furniture of English political culture in ways that are difficult to trace precisely and impossible to ignore entirely. The king against whom the army was raised believed that authority descended from God through the crown to the subject, unchanging and unchallengeable, the great chain of being made political. The army that defeated him was built on a different premise. That authority is demonstrated, earned, confirmed in action rather than granted by birth, and the conflict between those two premises is, in some form, the conflict that runs from the locked door of 1629 to the levelled muskets of the new model army at Naseby. The muskets win. They generally do in the end, when the argument has gone on long enough.